So I'm doing a video, and like I've been telling you, I'm trying to do a video for everything that they lie about. I have proof. So I let them lie and then I just prove it. Then let them lie and then I just prove it. So when I worked with some of the people that are talking and telling stories, they didn't have a problem. Suddenly in 2023, all of these stories are coming out years later. Again, you see, I'm doing everything publicly. They can leave a public comment and have a discussion. They aren't. And that's the point. So they said that in 2023, 2024, I worked with some guy who became so obsessed with me, he started looking into all my writing and things. So you can see I wrote articles. I wrote it in a notebook. So it's impossible that they were contributing to my writing when you can clearly see. And I said, even as a crafter, so they were like, you didn't craft. And then all of a sudden they see that I had articles about crafting with pictures. So that's a lie. That's something that I was able to easily disprove. I craft. The other thing is that when I was writing for different websites, one of the websites, I won't name the name because I don't want any negativity associated with them, because they were great to work with. They were great to write for. They even had like a writing academy for us writers so that they could kind of help us with our writing. So they were like, oh, you promoted yourself without saying you wrote it. Listen, all of these issues were not issues until recently. We're talking about what? Years ago, and now these things are becoming an issue. It's a lie. Okay, the other thing is they said that I didn't know anything about calligraphy and I didn't, practice calligraphy. Here's the notebook with all my practicing of calligraphy. Let me see if I can get this so that you guys can see. It's not just one day of practicing calligraphy. It's a lot of practicing of calligraphy. So let me see, so you guys can see. I'm not lying to make my feel like, oh, you started working for some company and all of a sudden you're talking about this stuff because you were working for this company and you had this sudden change. First of all, I was not in any way changing who I am to work for a company that recruited me. They went out of their way to recruit me. I mean, why would I, after being recruited, then have to impress them? I wouldn't. And that's my point. You can see from this notebook, when I'm talking about, let me bring this forward so if I can. Otherwise, everything may fall. Let me see if I can grab this for you folks. When I'm talking about, writing things like this, I practice this stuff. Let me take this other one to show you. I practice. I didn't just make this up. They're like, oh, you made it up because you wanted to impress people or something. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of, So you've seen all of this. I practiced it. So it's the idea that I would suddenly, everything to them seems sudden, since when? So they said, well, since when do you know anything about Latin? I told you folks, I grew up in Catholic school. For many years, Catholic Mass was in Latin. So throughout the school year, they would talk about things in Latin. So some people actually took Latin. I didn't take Latin. I told you guys I took Spanish, but some people took Latin. But growing up, they talked a lot about Latin because the Catholic Mass used to be in Latin. And so, there were certain things that they told us about in Latin. So we learned those things. The other thing I wanted to say is this was something that I had on the back of my iPad. It's a quote by Benjamin Disraeli, who was a British prime minister, and it's never complain, never explain. And I used to love that. Don't complain about crap and don't explain yourself. The only reason now I kind of think you should complain and explain a bit is because, especially at this point in my life, it's important. It's important that people know what's going on in my life, and it's important that I explain why it's going on. I find that it helps other people. It helps me too. And that's the point. I think, I'm telling you folks, I'm reflecting on my life. I think when I don't explain or complain, it seems like nothing bad happens to me, or, how would I know something, But by telling you folks what's going on in my life and complaining and explaining, I'm showing myself that I can do that. And it doesn't make me different, but it also helps other people. So they're like, well, you lecture people. No, I don't lecture anyone. I explain what goes on in my life. And I talk about what goes on in my life. And if somebody takes something away from that, then good. I've had people before like, oh, two extremes. Either, oh, you've never had these difficult times, or you've had too many difficult times. It's not an extreme. If I tell you folks what's going on and I complain and explain, then you guys can say, oh, okay, I can relate to that, or maybe I can't relate to that. That's what I'm saying. Like, at this stage in my life, I feel like this quote means something, but not the same thing it meant when I put it on my iPad, probably in 2012. So we're talking about 10 years ago. So maybe when I was about 38, 39. And when I was 38, 39, I was in a different place in my life, obviously. Now I'm in this place in my life, and it means something different. So they said, oh, you always reread things. Oh, I do. When I was in high school, one of my teachers had us read Albert Camus' The Stranger, which is about existentialism. And what I do periodically is I pick it up and I reread it to figure out how I feel about not only the characters, but I like to analyze the writing. So as somebody who loves to write, when I fall in love with a good writer, and to me, a good writer is somebody who can express feelings in a way that you feel it, then I have to reread it at different stages in my life. I talk about the stages of my life. I have to, because when I read it in high school, I took it one way. When I read it in college, I took it another way. I took an acting course, and I was going to use that as my presentation. And I was practicing it and practicing it. And it touched me in a way at that time. When I read it again, when I was a little bit older, it touched me in a different way. So I want to talk really fast about existentialism, but not in that kind of like, school way, but in a human way. The idea that we as human beings are not, things are so separate. I don't think so. I think there is a connection. And I think that what's going on in my life, they wanted to make it seem like it was always happening. It wasn't. But then they tried to create some sort of connection to things that weren't connected. I'll tell you what I think the connection is. I think the connection is that there are people who take advantage of other people at different points in our lives. And they get away with it when we're too young for people to believe us, or we're too young to explain. They get away with it when we're too busy working and we're just, we don't have time. They get away with it when we're too old and nobody cares. But there's that point in your life, and maybe I'm at that point in my life, where they just can't get away with it anymore, because I've become somebody who I am credible. We have the technology to document things that we couldn't document years ago. And their experiences with other people give them away. So that's how I feel like when we are discussing this, and this, people are discussing different things that have happened over the decades to women, to Black people, to other groups, and how it's changed over the years. It goes back to what I'm saying when I reread Camus' The Stranger. It changed for me as I got older. It changed from my different life experiences, but it changed for me based on how I'm reading it when I'm reading it. And that's the same thing as what I feel about my life. Something that I thought was an issue when I was very young might not be an issue now. Something that I thought wasn't an issue when I was younger, when I reflect on it, it was an issue. So I changed my life. The way I look at things changed, and I go over it. And now that I'm going over it publicly, I'm giving people the opportunity to publicly address it. So I don't want to make this video too long. Thanks for watching. I'll tell you more of their lies and refute more of their lies publicly later. Thanks.